Guys, Roland here, and today we have an amazing conversation for you. We will be talking about binaural beats, brainwave entrainment music, what they're all about, and how they can benefit us. And with me is an amazing guest I will introduce right after this. Welcome to Conversations with Roland, where the goal of this show is to learn life secrets through diverse experiences. I am your host, Roland Achenjang. Guys, welcome to another episode of Conversations with Roland. As always, I am super excited to record these conversations, and today is no different. Today with me is an amazing guest who will be telling us all she knows about brainwave entrainment, music, binaural beats, etc. My guest is an author and a specialist in personal development with a diverse body of work that rests upon the foundation of heart-centered consciousness. As an innovator in the emerging field of brainwave entrainment audio meditation, she empowers others in their journeys to self-discovery by demonstrating how to connect to inner guidance, achieve inspiration, improve wellness, and develop intuition. She is the co-founder of Sacred Acoustics and the co-author of Living in a Mindful Universe. And she's now a regular in Conversations with Roland, so I'd like to welcome Karen Newell. Karen, how are you?
Thank you, Roland. It's so great to be back with you again.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy that you're here. And just an interesting side note, we're both rocking blue today. And I know we did not plan that, so that's kind of cool.
The same shade, too.
That is true. And what's neat is if you've followed chakra colors, blue, I believe, is the throat chakra. So it's all about speaking, and hopefully we can speak our truths as clearly as we can today as we talk about binaural beats. Yeah.
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it. Before we begin, I'd like us to just take a quick step back and do an introduction about who you are. I know we talked about this in the last conversation, but for people who didn't watch it, it would be nice to understand why you so quickly, and I think this is fascinating, began to explore alternative methods of healing, of knowing yourself. And part of that usually may have to do, and this is my understanding, with the way we were raised. And so just as a child, what was life like for you?
Well, my dad was a military man, so we moved all over the place. And I went to 7 different schools throughout my school years. But when I was very young, my family, we were Christian. We went to Methodist church, but my grandmother was especially Christian. She was very concerned as a child that I would end up in hell. So she spoke with me about how I needed to accept Jesus into my heart, and so that I wouldn't go to hell. And when she had this conversation with me, it was pretty interesting because I didn't really believe her. I didn't believe that this could be the case, that just because I didn't know who this Jesus was, I would end up spending all of eternity burning in some horrible place. And I thought, well, what about all the other kids who haven't heard about this? And she said, well, we have missionaries. That's what we're doing. We're out there to spread the word. And I just kind of didn't agree with her. And I kept it to myself, though. And so I continued going to church. I loved going to the youth group activities. But I had this kind of inner secret that I didn't really believe what I was supposed to believe in the context of all of this. And I remember when I was going to church camp, this was on the, I was living in Oregon at the time. That's where I spent a good part of my youth, was in the beautiful green Oregon. And we would go to the beach every summer and we would go to church camp. And this was so much fun for me, but I got a little concerned, and I asked one of the ministers who were the counselors were very young. This was in the 70s, so they had guitars and they were kind of hippie-ish. But I remember telling one of these counselors that, I don't think I believe in God. And he said to me, well, it's not for everyone. And I said, well, can I still come to church camp? And he said, of course you can. It's about fellowship. And I was so relieved. And that's when I realized I didn't have to believe what authority told me. And in fact, I didn't have to keep it to myself, that it would be okay. Now, if I had been in a different setting and asked a different minister that question, I might have gotten a different answer. But in this case, I continued to go to church camp very happily. And when they would tell us at certain points to go out in the woods to commune with God, I would say, nah, I'm not going to commune with God. I'm going to commune with nature, because I loved the ferns, the trees, the bushes, the bugs, the wind, the clouds, the ocean. That's what I would kind of merge with. And of course, it was much, much later in life that I realized that nature force could absolutely be considered a God force. The God that I rejected was the God of the dogmatic teaching sort of God, that you need to be afraid of this God and that he was in charge of us. And that never rang true to me. So as I went through life, I just had this curiosity about, well, if that's not true, then what is true? And I started exploring all kinds of different spiritual traditions, including Christianity, but the Western traditions, Eastern traditions. I really settled on having a great interest in esoterica, kind of like theosophical writings, Rudolf Steiner, things like that. That more Western esoterica is what I could really relate to more so than the Eastern tradition. But this is how I went through life, just sort of looking for the answers. And I had an incredibly open mind. I would listen to anything and really consider anything. But I had also, and still have, a very strong sense of discernment of what I will truly believe in, what I will kind of open my mind to what might be possible.
Oh, yeah. That's such a sweet story, and thank you for sharing. And there are so many things you said that I can relate to. One of them was the fact that you moved around quite a bit. And even though many people can look at that and say it's not a good thing to be always on the move, that was my experience as well. But the good thing is that it does help you be open-minded, because you come across different people and maybe even different cultures. If you move internationally like I did, that helps you kind of reconcile the differences and question, why are we doing certain things a certain way? Because once you get to know the people that you're around, like truly know them, what they are after is the same thing you are after, just in a unique way. And so that can help reconcile those differences.
Well, and traveling also gives you I imagine for you too, this ability to adapt, to just make yourself fit in wherever you are somehow.
Yeah. You end up becoming a chameleon for some reason. But even with the adaptability piece, the one thing you talked about was the discernment that you had. And, there are two times, at least in your story, that I picked that up. One was when in camp, I think that's where you were comfortable telling one of the camp counselors that you didn't really believe in the God that the camp was sort of explaining. But what they said was so profound and so beautiful. And to me, that's a beautiful story of being comfortable with who you are, going against your fears to express it, knowing that you may not get the response that you were expecting, but then you're pleasantly surprised by what the counselor said, which was accepting you as you are, and then also them being a counselor at what I would imagine a Christian camp, knowing that Christianity is really about the fellowship. I thought that was, I think that's fascinating. That you
fellowship.
got that,
it was a word that was used in the Methodist Church, and that's what I liked about it. Being with all the kids, playing, everything was very wholesome, and yet we weren't constantly talking about the dogma. That was only at certain points, so I could really be quite comfortable.
Yeah, that's neat. So that propels you forward, and then you're exploring these different modalities, different ways of getting to know yourself. I know in our last conversation we talked about meditation being a big part of your journey, but we're here today to talk about these, what might be new to so many people, the technology of binaural beats and how that can help us get to know ourselves better. And so when did you first learn about binaural beats, for instance?
Well, was during a, I'll say 3 to 4 year period that I came to affectionately call my spiritual boot camp, because I was taking course after course after course. So this was roughly 2006 to 2010, I would say. And in the process of doing this, I was very curious about, I mentioned I had done all of this reading, and the things that I read about could also be experienced. And so I wanted to generate these sort of firsthand experiences. And this is why I was taking the courses. So healing touch for animals, Reiki. I wanted to feel energy that people would talk about. And I did sort of learn how to feel it. It was much more subtle than I thought. I expected it to be much more splashy. And that was the first kind of thing I had to realize, is that these things are very subtle. And so as I'm learning the energy healing, almost every single class I went to, they would have us meditate. And to me, that was pretty challenging, meditating, settling the mind. I had a job as a project manager in the technology and publishing industry. And so I was constantly planning and, creating new projects and so on. And so when I would sit to try to meditate, that's what would be going through my mind, or conversations I needed to have. And it was challenging. So I just thought, well, I'll do everything else, but not worry about the meditating. But it kept coming up. And so for me, it was sound that really helped to calm the mind. Things like tuning forks, crystal bowls, brass bowls, gongs, those kinds of sounds really helped to quiet the mind. And so it was fascinating when I learned that it was actually tuning forks that inspired the man, his name is Dove, Henrik Wilhelm Dove, I believe, in the 1800s. He discovered binaural beats by playing with these tuning forks. So he would put one tuning fork, you tuning fork, sort of bang on your knee and then hold it up to your ear, and you hear this beautiful sound. So he would hear that in one ear, and then he'd put a slightly different frequency in the other ear, and it would create what's called sort of a wavering sound. That just means wah, wah, wah. And those tuning forks started giving people these kind of altered states of consciousness where they felt a little different, a little more relaxed. And so I was very curious if that sort of thing might work for me. Now, just to tie it together, it turns out that brass bowls and crystal bowls have built-in binaural beats to them. Anything that makes that sort of wah, wah sound repetitively. So it's no wonder those kind of sounds really help to get us into a quieter state of mind. So it was the digital, precise creation of binaural beats, however, that really were more powerful at getting into the states that I wanted to achieve. Do you want me to describe now how binaural beats are created?
I think that would be great. I mean, you've touched on so many foundational aspects of it, right? One of them, just to highlight again, was your desire to experience what you were reading in terms of the ability to have alternative states of consciousness or even perform Reiki energy healing. And before you talk about this again, I really like that you mentioned how subtle these energies are, right? And I mean, they're so subtle, sometimes people can experience them and then discount them just because of how subtle they are and say, oh, that was nothing. But yeah, please go ahead.
And on that subject, sometimes when we hear these amazing stories of spiritual adventures people have had, whether out of body experience or maybe a communication from someone who has died, it's where I was going with that. We can have what I call experience envy, where we want to have that big splashy experience, and when it doesn't happen that way, we're disappointed. So our expectation, building that expectation, I learned, could be very disappointing, I would say. But binaural beats, I mentioned that Wilhelm Dove put one frequency in one ear, one in the other. It's the difference between them that creates that wavering sound. And so it's the difference between them that correlates to different brainwave states of awareness. So when we do an EEG on a brain, that's a device that measures the electric signal that's coming out of the brain. It's measured in hertz. So 0 to 4 hertz, that's the delta state. That's the lowest hertz possible when our brain is at its quietest. That's when we're asleep, the delta state, or maybe deep in coma. That's what the delta state is known for. 4 to 6 hertz, that's the theta state. That state is associated with meditation, with creativity, sort of that state between fully awake and fully asleep.
Okay.
And then 12 hertz, that's the alpha state. That's associated with concentration and focus, relaxation. And then 12 to 30 hertz, that's the beta state. That's the state that we're in when we're walking around, we're talking. That's the state that we want to move out of when we go into a quieter, calmer state. Now, up above 30 hertz, that's the gamma range and lambda and some others. Gamma is associated with very deep, profound meditation, but also a runner's high, like people who are athletic and they get to a certain point in their exercise that they sort of achieve this amazing sort of state that they call the runner's high. I haven't experienced it myself, but maybe you have because you're smiling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that gamma state, up above 30 hertz. Now, the way these binaural beats work is that it's the difference between the two. So to send someone a gamma signal, you would have to send you a frequency, say 100 hertz in one ear, 130 hertz in the other ear, right, to get that 30 hertz. But that doesn't make the same kind of wavering sound. So gamma seems to be an artifact from being in these other types of states. At least when you're in meditation, you might start out in the theta range, move into gamma through some profound experience. But it's really those lower states that binaural beats do such a great job at. And so if we want to say, feed someone a 4 hertz signal, recall that's the high delta range right before theta. So that's that space between awake and asleep. Now, this is known as the hypnagogic state. Just so people know, we're all familiar with this because we experience it every single day as we're falling asleep at night and when we're waking up in the morning, although they call that the hypnopompic state. When we're transitioning from awake to asleep or sleep to awake, we're naturally in this sort of roughly 4 hertz range. And so to feed a binaural beat of 4 hertz, we would say put 100 hertz in one ear, 104 hertz in the other ear. And that difference is the driver that brings that support for the audio support for the brain move into that state more easily. And for me, I found them to be incredibly useful because of that crazy thought stream that's constantly going on. It really helped me to focus better and to move my attention away from those racing thoughts. Now, just one comment about that. The expectation when you first start out that all of these thoughts will just magically disappear is another expectation that might frustrate, especially the beginner. I know it did me. And what I learned, though, is that I could focus enough that I could simply move my awareness away from the thoughts, put my focus on something else, and the thoughts sort of fade into the background. But they are still kind of there. And so you end up kind of maintaining a dual awareness where you kind of still know your thoughts are going on, but you have this other focus. And that's how I learned with binaural beats to achieve these kinds of states, by quieting the mind and then using my focus, my intention, to create any sort of experience that I might want to have.
Man, you've said a lot there. Clearly very knowledgeable about this, which, I mean, naturally you should be. You have a whole company built around this technology. Now, all the different waves you talked about, the delta, theta, alpha, you even mentioned gamma and beta as well. Let's go back to them just to spend a little bit more time on them. So the 0 to 4 hertz, that's the delta wave frequency. And you said this is when we are asleep, almost like in a coma. Now, if somebody's listening to any one of your, brainwave entrainment sounds, in this range, what can they expect to happen, or what are the benefits of being in a prolonged state of comatose like?
Okay. Well, first of all, everyone's brain is slightly different. I've learned that brain waves, when they're read with an EEG, are so unique from one individual to another, they can even be used like fingerprints. So we're all have slightly different responses depending on what's going on in our brain to begin with. But generally speaking, delta is used to help people sleep. People who have insomnia, who can't get to sleep at night, this is the lowest delta signals will help people achieve that sleep state. But if we're up in the higher range of delta, say around that 4 hertz, that's where we try to maintain that balance between awake and asleep. And so some people might just fall asleep when they're trying to maintain their awareness. But that's the trick, to get the body profoundly asleep while the mind can stay awake and alert. And that's the idea. And one way you can tell you're in that state, this is really kind of interesting, is sometimes I would be laying there thinking, well, I feel relaxed. Am I in the hypnagogic state? And I would hear myself snoring. And that's when I knew my body was asleep. And they were just little gentle snores, but that little kind of deeper breathing, it's like, oh my gosh, and you hear that means you're on the right track. So delta can be used for sleep or for maintaining that hypnagogic state.
Awesome. Now, part of the reason I'm laughing is because I've read the book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, a couple of times. And in there, Yogananda's teacher actually tells him that if you are asleep and you're not snoring, you're not sleeping very well. So
that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. So, right around that 4 hertz, you're crossing over from delta to the theta wave frequency. And the theta, that's between 4 and 8. You mentioned what this can be used for. Kind of, I would imagine you're a little bit more out of the hypnagogic state. And so if I'm shopping for brainwave entrainment music, I end up on Sacred Acoustics website. What with this wave or these frequencies, what can I use them for?
Well, the theta frequency, as I said, is associated with meditation and creativity and imagery and fantasy. And if you're listening to theta, realize that theta is the brain state that children are in naturally until they're roughly around 7 years old. So imagine those children in theta. I think babies are more so in delta a lot, but at some point they switch to that delta. Just think about how that's when children are learning language. That's when they're learning, they're like little sponges just soaking up everything around them. So when you get into a theta state, that means your brain is like that. It's more impressionable. You can start to use it to change limiting belief patterns. You can use it to inspire creativity, to simply get into a meditative expanded state of awareness and do other techniques that you might have learned from other meditation practices. Some people combine theta with different breathing techniques or different mudras, different sort of things they've learned elsewhere, because theta is kind of just that, that's the sweet spot. That's where we really feel in touch with something greater than who we are, where we can kind of set aside the 5 physical senses kind of sensations and really just emerge in this vibrational state. So that's a very wide range of opportunities that can be approached with the theta state.
Okay. Now, in listening to you, 2 things just came up. With the delta waves, you can use that to help you fall asleep. Now, if you're listening, is your sleep prolonged? So you want like an 8-hour, delta audio, or do you want like a 1 hour to help you fall asleep? And then the idea is that afterwards you'll be able to maintain your deep sleep.
Well, that's the idea, that you would listen for about an hour to help yourself get asleep. There's different kinds of insomnia, so some people have trouble falling asleep, but once they get asleep, stay there. So there's not necessarily a need to listen all night long, although some people fall asleep just fine but then they wake up and can't get back to sleep. So if that's the case, then I recommend listening to that recording again. We do have recordings, Delta, another one called Sacred Sleep. There's a few that can be used for sleep.
Okay, awesome. Now, with the theta waves, that inspires me as something you can listen to while you're at work or maybe around the house. Like, this is when you're awake, you're not, or I guess you could also do it if you were meditating to help you get into maybe a deeper state of meditation. But it seems like it would help you be more creative if you have that playing in your office when you're at work or something like that.
Yes, that is one very beautiful application, to listen while you're doing other activities. Some of our recordings are set up for that, and some really are meant to, lie down, put on your headphones and really absorb. The ones where we mix in Delta with Theta for a whole little journey. But we have recordings with only 6 hertz frequencies in them. 4 to 7, remember, is Theta. So 6 hertz can be found on whole Theta, or a recording we have called Cosmic Womb, because that was created for our audio engineer when his wife was pregnant. So he made that to accompany childbirth, and we actually used it when my grandson was born, and it is the most beautiful thing. That it's really for what you said. It is truly flexible like that. You can use it to get into deeper states, or you can listen to it, say, if you're writing, if you're painting, if you're doing something you want to have any creative inspiration for. Yes, you can listen to Theta for sure.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. We'll move on to the alpha waves. This is the 8 to 12 hertz frequency. What can you tell us about the benefits of this frequencies or these waves?
Well, alpha frequencies are what really helps people focus. So people who have ADD, or they just, have trouble focusing on that paper they need to write or that spreadsheet they need to create, alpha really helps you get into that calmer focus state without being so drowsy or in fear of falling asleep. Alpha likely won't put you to sleep, while Theta may put some people to sleep. Alpha probably won't, but it'll help you stay very relaxed and focused on whatever you're doing. And for sure, we recommend listening to whole alpha is another track for while you're doing other activities.
Yeah. Okay. The beta, that's our waking state, right? When we are going 100 miles per hour, we have all kinds of thoughts.
Yes.
And so we're not going to go into that. And I would actually be... This is an interesting question. Do you guys ever make beta wave entrainment sounds?
Well, interestingly, we add beta at the end of some of our recordings with the theory that it's bringing people back to everyday consciousness. Some people love those sounds, and some people really don't love those sounds. And so some people actually edit them out at the end, and others just turn it off at that point. Some say that's their favorite part. It's challenging to meet every need with every recording, but that's why we have a lot of different ones. Occasionally we'll pop beta in just a tiny bit in the middle of a sound journey where you may have really gotten so relaxed that you just want to wake you up a teeny little bit. So we might pop in a little beta there, but generally, no, we don't create beta recordings.
Wow. So that strikes me as something that's actually very valuable. And I'm just speaking from, thinking about reaching a wide range of audience or customers. And the reason for that is, even in meditating, if you aren't using binaural beats, for instance, at the end of the meditation, whoever is guiding you, especially if it's a guided meditation, will want to bring you back to earth somehow. So they'll tell you to wiggle your toes, maybe move your fingers or something. So that's kind of nice, because you're not always going to be in the delta state or alpha or theta state for that matter. So that's nice that it brings you back. Yeah, I see that as beneficial. Sweet deal. Thanks for telling me. Mm-hmm. We talked about the gamma. That's really tough to produce, just because of the fact that there might be something, you mentioned there might be something that's associated with getting to that state by spending more time in the other states.
Well, when we've measured gamma in other people, it's been when they're in kind of extraordinary altered states. So we once put our EEG device on a medium, And while she was, when she really hit on her reading, that's when she would shift into this gamma state. And that was pretty fascinating to see. But yes, the binaural beats, we have trouble driving the gamma because they are so far apart. But we do have one recording that we have put gamma into, although it also includes different combinations of delta, alpha, eta, and that is our recording light body. So that one's got the whole gamut in there. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, it is. Now, it is. I mean, I think it's fascinating. The first time I ever came across this sort of technology was in reading about Dr. Bob Monroe and the work that he was doing. And he had HemiSync. That was what he produced. And with the idea of HemiSync, is that in something that is part of Sacred Acoustics sounds? Is there synchronization of the brain hemispheres while listening to?
All right. So this is an interesting point that you bring up. So HemiSync, yes, was Bob Monroe's technology. He's really the first person who brought this into the modern world. But this was back in the 60s and 70s, 1960s and 70s when he was developing it. And I've actually that was my favorite binaural beats before we started creating our own. HemiSync was a huge inspiration. But this idea, when I learned about HemiSync, the same thing I learned was that the two left and right brains would synchronize when listening to these recordings. And they had these little pictures that showed the brain, brain was actually synchronizing. And when we got our EEG device, this is what we looked for. We thought, well, let's see, we're going to see our brains synchronize. And they never did. Our right and left brain never synchronized. And so I believe that was a theory. And I don't believe that it is the actual real cause. I don't know if cause is the right real effect of what's
That's
going on.
Outcome. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But lots and lots of people went off of that. So you have holosync, you have synchronization, you have brain sync, synchronicity. It's pretty interesting that people picked up on that. But what we feel is happening is that the tones help to influence the brain to get into a quieter state, to let the thinking brain kind of have its own time out somewhere. We think that it's driving the brain to these lower frequencies, but not necessarily syncing the left and right brain. In fact, very often we would see that the left brain was quieter while the right brain was more active, which makes sense, right? Because the left brain contains our language center. And so when we quiet down those words, it would make sense that our more expansive right brain might have more activity. But the jury's still out on exactly what's going on there. But we did not confirm the synchronization, I'll tell you that. So something else is going on.
So in your case, then, what are you achieving, or what are you achieving with both hemispheres with Sacred Acoustic sounds?
Well, I would tell you that I don't really think too much about my hemispheres. What I'm achieving is letting go of any brain activity at all to really sink into the feeling aspect, to the vibrational aspect or essence, the non-physical part of me. And so our theory is that the tones are affecting the lower brain stem, which is where consciousness really arises from, and that's a very primitive part of the brain. And but we don't really know. Honestly, scientists do not know exactly what's going on when we listen to these binaural beats. Who does know what's going on is the individual listener. Each of us, when we listen, we can decide, how is this affecting me? And spending too much time thinking about what's going on in the brain might be a little counterproductive. At least that's what I found, is to just go into the feeling of it all and not worry exactly about precisely what is going on to cause it, but to just really just immerse myself in the experience of it.
Yeah, it sounds like it takes some faith. I mean, it's not getting into the dogma area, but you know how we as humans are. We always want to know why something is happening, what's happening. And that may sometimes give us a little bit of a foundation to make us feel comfortable to take that
Yeah,
next step.
I would say
Yeah.
it's not humans, it's the Western mind.
Uh-huh.
We want to know why.
Yeah, we do.
Not necessarily every human, needs to
Yeah.
know, but
Yeah.
there is a science behind it. These signals are very much developed to affect the brain, but not necessarily to synchronize them.
Yeah. Okay. Pretty neat. Now, with HemiSync, when you used those back when you discovered them, did you have the experiences of alternate states of consciousness, even though you probably didn't have the hemisynchronization that technology?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. HemiSync is whatever it's doing, it has an effect, whether, whatever it's doing to the two left and right sides. To continue to think that that's what's going on, again, it's counterproductive, but it is having an effect. Engineers love HemiSync because they can take it apart, put it back together. In fact, my co-founder of Sacred Acoustics is an engineer, a mechanical and electrical engineer, who then became an audio engineer, just using some of the same concepts.
Yeah, pretty sweet. So I understand that you actually have a sample, probably like a 1 minute long sample of one of these binaural beats. I think it would be nice if we listen to it. And then when we come back from that, we can talk about the best ways to listen to any one of these brainwave sounds that you've created. Sorry.
Yes, I will play. I have a 1 minute sample, very short, but this should give you an idea. And just so your listeners know, always best to have headphones on to get the best effect. So here we go.
It is said that the sound of Om represents the primordial vibration that makes up everything in the universe, where one is all and all is one.
So hopefully you heard that sort of, it's in there, that sort of wah, wah, wah rhythmic sound. That's the binaural beat. The other sounds that you're hearing are just other sounds that we've added. Now, one thing to keep in mind, this particular recording is available in a 20-minute version. So if you liked that, it's completely free. Go to sacredacoustics.com, enter your email on the free download page, and we'll send you a longer version of that. And again, the best way to listen is with using headphones. But I want to point out that not only are there binaural beats in the technology that we create, we actually call it, Bob Monroe had HemiSync, call ours neural helix. And embedded with the binaural beats are also monaural beats. And that allows us to create what people often call a more holographic experience, where you feel it all around you instead of just on the left and right side. But every single frequency we include, monaural, binaural, or if it's not a precise digital frequency, it's harmonic to every other. So hopefully you heard the harmony in that 1 minute sample, very short. But many binaural beats, if you listen to them, people will include white noise or pink noise, or even just rain or ocean sounds to kind of diminish the precise digital kind of computer sound. But when we apply harmonic principles, we have less need to do that, and it ends up sounding much more musical. And I want to point out that every single product we offer has a 1 minute sample, and there's a very wide variety of different sounds to choose from.
Yes, there is. I can attest to that. I've browsed your website and looked at all the offerings you have. definitely a wide variety that anyone can explore. And you do actually have a free bundle, I
Yes.
think. I don't know if it's still free, but I know with the whole COVID.
It is.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's
I
called
wanted to mention that too, but I didn't want to go on and on. So thank you for mentioning that. Yes, about a year ago, we made this whole mind bundle available for free. When we entered into the COVID pandemic series of events, we decided to make that available to everyone. This is a set of recordings that includes whole delta, whole theta, whole alpha, hour-long versions that you can listen to while doing other activities, and also 6 20-minute versions of the same frequencies. 3 of them have verbal guidance and the other 3 not. So it's a very nice collection. It's available at a very reduced price of $19 or free, no questions asked for those in financial uncertainty. But these recordings were used in a pilot study in a Manhattan, New York City psychiatric practice, which found a 26% reduction in anxiety just after 2 weeks of listening. And her patients who didn't listen to the recordings only saw a 7% reduction in anxiety the same time period. And so these people were directed to listen to these recordings whenever they wished, at least once a day for the 20 minutes, but also while they were doing activities. And people started saying, like, there was a medical student who got better scores on her exams because she used it to study and also to get better sleep. There was one person who spent a lot of time listening to these recordings, and a kind of toxic relationship that he had been involved in for many, many years and couldn't get himself out of, suddenly found himself out of the relationship. He was able to somehow make that move, and it was after listening to these recordings. So all kinds of things can happen. One cautionary thing to tell listeners is, if anyone listens to these recordings and starts to feel a little emotional, some people will trigger sort of unprocessed emotional traumas from long ago. And sometimes they can be severe traumas, in which case you want to be a little careful about that. And other cases, they're just minor traumas, but they seem so traumatic because we weren't able to properly process those emotions at that time. And I know when I first started listening to these kinds of recordings, I would trigger emotions I didn't really understand. And once I started to realize what was going on, when I started to feel emotional, I could just let myself feel that emotion, and it would evolve, and it would then processed. I didn't necessarily have to put a story to it, remember why I was feeling that way, although sometimes I did. But all kinds of things can happen when you're listening. So there also on the website is a series of what I call training videos that will tell you common concerns, what to expect, how to listen, and all of the details anyone might want to know.
Man, that was, I don't know what else to add. That was so awesome. But it is all true. You guys, you've done so much work with this technologically. You know, I think it's really advanced with all the different beats. You talked about the monaural beats that are included, the binaural beats, the use of technology that was discovered since the 1800s by, I think it's Dr. Wilhelm Dove, you mentioned. And so the sounds, yes, they sound very holistic, kind of all around. But I was going to ask if you've heard any feedback about not knowing which particular sound to listen to if you're listening to them.
Yes.
and,
Yes.
And what people, a beginner might, face there. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be very overwhelming. And honestly, there's only 20 some titles, but within that collection, there's so much to choose from because we bundled them in different ways depending on your personal goals. Where we recommend beginners start is absolutely with the free download and that whole mind bundle, because that really gives you an idea of which frequencies are sort of your sweet spot, which frequencies you really respond to the most. And most of our other recordings are actually combinations of different frequencies. And that's where the real spiritual journeying can take place, as we say. And that someone might want to do, for example, let's say you have a problem that you can't make a decision on. So sometimes I would go into these states and I would pose a question and try to see if I might find an answer. And sometimes I did. Some people will develop relationships with specific spirit guides that they encounter. Others might just get the information as sort of an intuitive knowing. I know that people, when they start listening to these, unexpected things happen. So while you may have one goal, your goal is just to get better sleep. And then you start to get better sleep, but suddenly your grandmother who died when you were 16 suddenly shows up to say hello. So you know, it's better to have no expectations, honestly, but once you become comfortable, you can use your intention for example, to connect with grandmother. And so if you were comfortable and that was something that you wanted to do, the advice there would be to just imagine what it felt like to be with your grandmother. Not necessarily what she looked like and what her name was, although that's part of it, but what did it feel like? What did she smell like? What was it like to be in your presence? How does it make you feel? Were you happy? Find that feeling, and your grandmother will find you. That's typically how it works. But people have all kinds of goals, as you say, and we do have a page called I Want To. And when you go to that page, we have all the different goals people might have and then point you in a different direction. And of course, many of our bundles are put together to address certain goals like health, transformation, end of life, creativity, and so on.
Yeah. No, I think that the experiences people are going to have are going to be as diverse as they are. And I was hoping we would talk about this, and you alluded to it at the beginning of our conversation sometime when you mentioned that people's brain waves are very unique in that sense. And what I like about this technology is that it speaks to the interconnectedness of everything and everyone. In that if you expose yourself to certain frequencies, because everything's vibrating, whether it's sound or even, images that you're looking at, when you expose yourself to that, your body is going to take that information and it's going to change somehow, right? Whether it's good or bad, that's really up to you to qualify. But the same thing will happen when you listen to either binaural beats or Sacred Acoustics, brainwave entrainment sounds. And so if you can be comfortable with that, then I would say explore. Something will happen, something different will happen. And the more you spend time with the technology, the better it is for you to be able to discern which sounds work for you and when.
Yeah, and another fun thing is that these sounds can sometimes affect your dream space. And so even if you're listening during the day, some people listen right before they go to sleep. But some people very unexpectedly, they will say, "Oh my gosh, I'm remembering dreams. I could never remember my dreams before." Others will say that their dreams have now become lucid, where they actually realize they're dreaming while they're dreaming. And others will say that the tones seem to give them nightmares, right? Mm-hmm. But nightmares can be just as productive as happy dreams, depending on the situation. So having any effect at all is just what's so amazing. And then what those effects are gives you something to work with. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Karen, let's talk about something here with the carrier sounds that you have in your recordings. Can you explain those a little bit?
Yes. Well, the carrier frequencies, those are the frequencies you hear. So when I say put 100 hertz in one ear, 104 hertz in the other, it's the 100 and 104 that you're hearing. The human ear can only hear between 20 hertz and 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz, I think it is. Is that correct? 20 hertz to 20,000 roughly. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. So under 20 hertz is where all the brainwave states are, 0 to 4, 4 to 7, 8 to 12. And so the carriers are incredibly important. And those carriers are what we make harmonic to every other set that's in a particular recording. So the ohm frequencies that were included on the 1-minute sample that we just listened to, those carrier frequencies are 108 hertz, 216 hertz, and 432 hertz. Now, if you understand math, you know that 108 plus 108 equals 216, 216 plus 216 equals 432. That makes those frequencies harmonic to each other. If we threw in one that wasn't harmonic, it would sound a little dissonant. And that's why those carrier frequencies are so important. And so we select those just as carefully as we select the brainwave states, because higher ones have different effects than lower ones. So if you're listening up in the like 2000 hertz range, that's more like birds chirping or something. And then down in the lower range, like around 100 hertz, that's a deeper sort of sound. So some people respond better to those higher frequencies and some respond better to the lower. I will tell you that light body recording has higher frequencies on it, and some people really, really enjoy that.
Absolutely.
Oh, and then the other extreme I'll tell you is low band pi trance, which has very low frequencies. So those are two to check out, two completely different ways of approaching binaural beats.
Absolutely. Thank you. We're right at the end here, or really close to. And I would want to ask if you don't mind sharing one of your more memorable experiences that you've had listening to any one of these sounds.
All right. Let's see.
Yeah.
I've had quite a lot of very profound experiences, and I've had quite a lot of very subtle experiences. So I'm trying to choose between all of those. I'm going to tell you about a big adventure. The big adventure.
Okay.
That's the one that comes to mind. So again, this didn't happen early on. It happened much later on, but I developed a relationship with a spirit guide, like I told you. Now, keep in mind, I'm not someone who, when I describe these things, is seeing these things in vivid, real life sort of fashion. But what you learn to realize is that you just kind of feel like you're involved in something and you just know what you're doing. It's very strange. But at any rate, I was greeted by this spirit guide who would appear to me just as a blue face, really. A blue face would show up. And he would wear a robe, but he would always take me around on a flying carpet. And so once we got on this flying carpet, and that's when I knew we were headed off, we ended up flying to another planet, and we were swooping all around between these beautiful grassy hills and valleys, and we ended up landing in front of this very small house, this very small four-sided house. And I knocked on the door, and this very old woman answered, and she grabbed my hand and pulled me inside. And I was a little nervous about just being pulled inside, but the next thing I knew, she melted into the ground. All four walls of the house fell down, and I found myself receiving this beam of energy from above that felt to me like this incredible love force entering into my body. And so all of that kind of adventure led me to this incredible receiving of love energy. And that is how these things can happen. Sometimes they just, I would never have expected that series of events to happen, nor would I have thought, let me try to make this happen. But going through all of that led me to this amazing love energy. And very often in my experiences, that's where I would find myself in different fashion. One other very more simple one is that imagine myself moving around in a ball of light, and I would see other balls of light, see with my mind's eye. There would be these other balls of light, and when I would sort of expand my love energy, these balls of light would come towards me and increase my love energy. So you can see that I used it a lot for connecting to this love energy in different ways. Those are two examples.
Oh, those are beautiful. No, thanks for sharing. I mean,
these kind of experiences, I have to say, they're very personal. And when you share them with others, sometimes they look at you like you're a nut. And that's why it can be hard to share these kind of experiences. But I've learned over time that, it is what it is. So.
It is. One thing that I have come to just accept is that we are all unique on our unique paths to the same end. And the English language is difficult to describe some of these experiences that we've had. But many times, until you've had something like this, you're going to think everybody else who has had it and is describing it is a nut. This is true. But I mean, for you, you've always been open-minded, and I'm the same way. We have similar backgrounds, and I've had some very profound, unique experiences too with binaural beats. Most of them have been with just meditating. But one time with binaural beats, I'll never forget this. I was in Montana one morning, laying on my couch and listening to some. This was actually, I think, Chemisync. And in the middle of that, I was able to see clearly this lady walking down some very funny street in Germany. And I could see just from her neck down to like the top of her knee and see what she was wearing. And she was wearing like this green blouse and white jeans. And she had headphones on connected to her phone, and her phone was in her back pocket. And then she had a purse. And she's just walking. And I knew exactly who it was. This was my girlfriend, who is now my wife. And I was like, what's she doing walking down some very funny street in Germany in the middle of the day? And when I got up when the session ended, I got out and I called her up. And I was like, hey, were you just walking in some very odd place that I know you've not ever been before? I just knew that she had never walked on that street before. And I described her outfit to the T. And at this time, she had finished a doctor's visit in a neighboring town and had come back to her town and was actually shopping in a department store wearing the exact same outfit, freaking out because I was able to describe. I did.
Yes.
I did.
So I've heard of that with people who actually they have out-of-body experiences and witness their loved ones doing their activities. Yeah, that is very cool.
Yeah, true story.
Yeah.
But no, the work you're doing with your co-founder, the engineer, and of course Dr. Eben Alexander, this is great. I'm a big fan of all these kind of things to help people heal, feel better, but most importantly, get to know themselves better and realize that there is so much more to us than our physical bodies, and there are many ways we can, what I like to say, play the earth life game. The more you know about yourself, the more you can respond to the stimuli that you are exposed to. And so meditation is one tool. Sacred Acoustics and the brainwave entrainment sounds that you guys are working on is certainly another tool. Not for everybody, but if it's your cup of tea, please visit sacredacoustics.com. It won't hurt by any means for you to download this free whole Sacred Acoustics Whole Mind Bundle and listen to it, give it a whirl. And I would imagine they can connect with you, Karen, through your website as well.
Yes, through the contact form on the website. Feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to hear stories and answer questions. Yeah,
for sure. And you're also on Facebook, and I'll have links to your website and your Facebook page in the notes section of this podcast. Before we wrap up, any last parting words?
Well, I think you just made an extremely, extremely important, vital point that we are really here to know ourselves beyond being a mother, being a sister, being a manager. We have an essence within, and it really is kind of our human birthright to understand that essence, because once you start to understand it, then you really start to live in a different way. And so many times when we're trying to straighten things out in the outer world, the external world, it can be so challenging. But when we start to focus on the inner world and get more in touch with that essence, then the outer world seems to sometimes just take care of itself. So it is really an imperative for all of us to develop some method, some technique, and there are so many, but some technique to go within and really feel that expanded awareness. That is what will change this world when each and every person on the planet decides to really make that effort. So thank you, Roland, for all that you do to help people and share all of these amazing interviews and techniques for others. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you. You guys are amazing. All right, guys, there you have it. Karen Newell just told us so much information about brainwave entrainment music and sounds. Again, connect with her on her website. Definitely download the free guide. You can connect with me and ask me questions. You can also get copies of Who and Why You Are on my website, or just about anywhere books are sold. And as always, please create an amazing day. Okay.
All right. Another one
Good.
bites the dust.